welcome to Fishin, the Merfolk Podcast, where we discuss Commander's most competitive tribe and help the whole community become better Merfolk players. I'm Kody, one of the co-hosts of the show, and not Kody Smith on Twitter. And we also have Matt, who you can find on Twitter as what?
You don't know my Twitter handle?
No, I do. I just like stopping at random points to see like if you'll know where to jump in. It's fun.
I really don't, but I'm only half paying attention most of the time anyway. So I'm Matthew Condilate. You can find me on the Twitter. I'm out there tweeting sometimes, replying mostly, trolling Kody's Twitter handle for the majority of the time.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to have you tagging in on things like that. So we have a very special guest on this episode, which is actually episode 49. Please welcome Brett from Kitchentable Commander. How's it going, Brett?
Hey, Brett. Hello. I'm good. You?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm not going to speak for Matt. Matt, how are you doing?
Mediocre.
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 Start.
So, as people who listen to the show know, I'm from the Great Plains of Bayhatter in Central Texas. So when we mow our lawns, we're actually just mowing dirt. So the sinus right now is a little strong, but my yard looks great, or my dirt looks great.
At least you have a lawn to mow, which here in Oklahoma, in the drier months like winter, people actually there's like a service where people come and paint your grass like a bluish green. So that way, like after a rain, it actually looks green. And so the brownness of your grass is just blended into this blue-green mess. I think it looks terrible, but
sometimes when I think, oh man, Texas, what are you doing? I always remember at least we have Oklahoma to make us feel better.
And Oklahoma has Alabama, so don't. If you're an Alabama listener, yeah, replace Alabama with Mississippi. It's fine. Please, we'd like to remind you that you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook is at fishcastmtg. That's where we like to talk about Merfolk in Commander, Legacy, Modern, whatever format you want to talk about. But we're also pretty open to talking about Magic in general. We're not entirely opposed to other types of Magic, although there really is only one correct way to play Magic. Anyway, we're gonna
don't talk to us about goblins. We don't care about goblins.
Yeah, Hobbs Q. We're tired of your goblin propaganda. I'm calling you out on this podcast. Please remember to subscribe in all the places that you can, and tell your friends at your LGS. The guy that in the corner that plays Merfolk all the time. Make sure to tell him about this podcast because that's a free way that you can support the show. If you'd like to support us in monetary ways, you can find us at patreon.com/fishcastmtg. That is the best way to support the show. And at $2 a month, which is 50 cents a show, you can get the show a few days early and ad-free, as well as have access to our Discord channel, where we have actually been recently talking about some Merfolk spoilers or preview cards in quotes that have come out. Join us there. You can also find our information on Inked Gaming. And Teespring is where you can find our merch and stuff. So
check out our playmat. The playmat's sweet.
Yeah, everything is in the show notes, so go ahead and find us there.
I have so many playmats, and now I only have one I can use. It's kind of a shame.
But it's a sweet playmat.
It is a sweet playmat. Maybe I'll just get 5 playmats and just put that one on top.
So now
I feel like I'm using everything.
So I actually have a question. As a Tron player using a Merfolk playmat, does that feel like you're inviting some sort of danger?
No, actually, I think it's more just being sneaky.
Oh, okay. So they see the Merfolk playmat and they go, "Oh, this Merfolk player," and then you go,
"Safe."
Then you go, "Urza's mine," and they go, "Oh no!"
Then I'm gonna wear my Jundam T-shirt while doing that.
Oh, just like really confuse them.
We're also on YouTube and Twitch, respectively, at youtube.com/fishcastmtg and twitch.tv/fishcastmtg. We actually played some Commander last night, and guess what? Merfolk won.
You played Merfolk?
Yeah, the Merfolk won, and it was great.
That's because I wasn't there.
Maybe on the next Commander brawl
stream?
Down the next Commander stream that we do, we'll have to have you on, Brett. I know that you've been in the middle of building a new computer, so I'm sure that hampered you in some fashion.
It definitely did. So count me in on the next one.
All right, we definitely will. The last thing I want to talk about, depending on if you're a patron or not, you will have seen or will soon see
Oklahoma Public Schools.
I was not in Oklahoma at any time during my schooling except for college, which
What's wrong with being in Oklahoma Public School?
They're terrible.
No.
They're underfunded and terrible. So if you are a patron, you will soon see, and if you are not a patron, you will have seen us on the Ravnica Allegiance preview stream, which comes out this Wednesday, January 16th. So this will come out a few days before or the day after, depending on if you're a patron or not. And we had a great time, or we will have a great time.
And can you believe that play that happened that one game?
Oh
my
man.
God, that was absolutely insane.
Or can you imagine the plays we're going to have playing standard Merfolk with these new cards? Oh, Ben really or underperformed.
I feel like I'm in the middle of a Quentin Tarantino movie right now.
I'm trying to make it relevant to all of our listeners.
So like depending on when they listen.
Yeah, depending on when you listen. So patrons get it the day before the streamer event, and non-patrons get it the day after the streamer event. So we'll see. Just pick it's like a choose your own adventure. And so if you're a patron, just pick the past tense, and if you're a non-patron, pick the post tense, I guess. Or vice versa. I don't know how this works.
Appropriate.
Yeah, pick the tense that's appropriate. Thank you, Brett.
You're welcome.
I appreciate your.
That's what I'm here for.
Or just take a sip of beer and call her a day.
Yeah.
Ooh, I should do that.
Yeah. So that's the last thing that we have to talk about. So we actually brought Brett on for two reasons. So the first reason is our topic tonight is brewing in Commander.
You never introduced Brett, by the way.
Oh, Brett. Yes, I didn't introduce you.
I mean, I wasn't going to stop you. You had quite the intro you had to manage there, so I get it.
And he didn't screw anything up. It was actually really impressive.
Absolutely zero.
No, I usually screw up.
People don't know this, but usually it takes like 7 takes just to get to the intro because Kody always messes it up. And that was a one-timer. That was just really impressive.
I can tell you right now, there is no editing involved in that whole intro. I say this pre-edit.
From the past or from the future.
Yeah, exactly. All of the tenses, choose them appropriately.
So Brett, go ahead and let us know, what brings you to the show and who you are a little bit.
Okay, so I'm Brett from Kitchentable Commander, as was mentioned earlier, and it's just kind of like I'm a Commander heavy guy. That's all I really care about is Commander, and anything that comes out in new sets that can be used in Commander, I'm all for. You can find me on youtube.com/kitchentablecommander, twitch.tv/kitchentablecommander, patreon.com/kitchentablecommander, and you can find me on Twitter at kitchentablecmd and Instagram at kitchentablecommander. I think I've covered it all.
All right, gonna put you on the spot real quick.
Oh crap!
Out of all the cards that have been spoiled so far, what's the best for Commander in your opinion, as of right now?
For
Ravnica Allegiance, let's clarify.
For Ravnica Allegiance, it's that there's that Orzhov one that they spoiled with. I'm trying to remember the exact name of it. It's the one where it has the guy spewing. No, Smothering Tithe. That's what it was. It wasn't.
Okay.
Smothering Tithe. I love the idea of. It's just you can just make all the treasure tokens and just build so much mana so quick, because when you're in a multiplayer game of Commander, you're just going to be you probably have a couple of mana hanging out there. You can just what is it, if whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If the player doesn't, you create a colorless treasure artifact token. So like somebody in the early doesn't have any mana left, and because they've done all their stuff and you've got that out there, they'll have to hold back so they can pay that too, so you don't get mana ramp, right?
Yeah, no, I feel it's I agree with you. I think it's one of the best cards for Commander. It feels like fair Rhystic Study or Mystic Remora.
I think that this is kind of like Matt said, it's very similar to Rhystic Study and Mystic Remora, but it's one of those things where like everybody knows that you shouldn't pay for Rhystic Study, but people very often leave it be, and that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. As my opponents found out on our Commander game that's going to be up this week, you shouldn't allow this to happen. This is going to be the same thing. This is going to be the same thing where white. This is such a great card for two reasons. Because number one, it helps with ramp, which white is terrible at.
Typically, yeah.
And it also, as a longtime Boros player, I can attest to Boros is terrible at ramp. And it also, a lot of white decks deal with artifacts, which is really important with getting treasure tokens. So this kind of deals with white in a way that it's not familiar with, but also a way it is familiar with. So I really like it. I like its design. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's really awesome, and I think it's probably going to be a Commander staple in anything that plays white for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. So our topic tonight or today, whenever you're listening, this morning, is brewing in Commander. So we're going to talk with Brett about his process, about how he brews decks for his channel and all that fun stuff. And then we're also going to tie it into how to use these practices in building a competent Merfolk deck. So, but before we get to that, we are going to do the time-tested Fishin' a Merfolk podcast segment, the Random Merfolk. And so we had...
Not enough of you guys have complained about it yet, so we're going to keep doing it.
We will do it until, even if you complain about it. So,
we'll just do it even harder if you complain about it.
So we asked Brett as our special guest to pick a number between 249 and I think it's now 253 because of
No, 1 and 253, not 249 and 253.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So we asked...
That math is killing you today, buddy.
Yeah, math is hard.
It's very hard.
So we asked Brett to pick a number between 1 and 253, which is the number that Merfolk will be at, or the cards that reference Merfolk after Ravnica Allegiance. So Brett picked card number 136, which actually is very appropriate for having Brett on the show to talk about Commander. Brett, do you want to read the card?
I certainly can. So the card is Prime Speaker Zagana, 2 double green, double blue, for a legendary creature Merfolk Wizard. Prime Speaker Zagana enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the greatest power among other creatures you control. When Prime Speaker Zagana enters the battlefield, draw cards equal to its power. So that is a fantastic card for any deck that can just pump out larger and larger creatures over and over again. Because every time you cast it, it's just going to get bigger and bigger, and then you just draw a buttload of cards.
She's not played in Modern. She's not played in Legacy.
But she's not played in Commander.
Yeah, she has played in Commander a lot, and well deserved.
Yeah. And I mean, she's a 1/1 on the baseline, but as Brett said, she gets a bunch of +1/+1 counters, which can matter in a blue-green deck. But I mean, Prime Speaker is a card that is used, I think, probably as often in Merfolk decks as she is in just blue-green value decks. Like, as long as you have, I mean, even if you have just a 5 power creature, Prime Speaker is crazy.
Yeah, so, she becomes a 6/6 and you get 6 cards.
Yeah, that's crazy. So 6 mana for a 6/6 that draws you 6 cards, like that is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's a good price to pay for drawing that many cards.
She's the reason you play Blink.
Yeah.
She's good in Blink decks, definitely.
Yeah, because it's not a cast trigger; it's an enter the battlefield.
Yeah.
She's also good as a commander. I mean,
Reanimator.
She was one of the backup commanders for the Commander 2015 product with Azuri. Claw of Progress, I think is what it was. Mm-hmm. Which that deck, it made perfect sense to have her in there, just because like how many counters you're adding on to things as you go. It's like I've seen that deck get explosive real quick.
And it also is very fitting that she is now being reprinted with some new abilities and a new art. And I don't know, new version's okay. This one's better.
Yeah, we'll be talking about the new version of Zagana in an upcoming episode. But I mean, this is just an all-star slam. I mean, as far as random Merfolk go, I think this is probably the best that we've ever had.
Coming from the alligator that's actually a crocodile, this is pretty good.
Yeah. I'm still upset about that. I haven't yelled about that enough on Twitter. After this, I'm gonna make a post about it because I'm still steaming about
hashtag alligators matter.
Yeah, root water alligators matter. So, I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't run this in Commander if you're in blue green. I mean, even if you're not like super big on like big creatures, like it's still just a great value card. Even, I mean, 6 mana for I'd say even a 4/4 that draws you 4 cards would be better than average, and you would still play it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it like Commander is not a fast format by any stretch of the imagination, and like 6 mana for something isn't all that bad, in fairness.
It's turn 4 if you get Soul Ring.
Well, yeah, pretty much. But like you're getting all the card draw you could possibly need anytime you can cast her or get her to, like, if you, like you said, with a blink deck, you're getting all that card draw pretty much every turn or more. And so like just throw in a Reliquary Tower or a Spellbook and call it a day.
Yeah.
Yep. Fun stuff. All right. So, Brett,
if you're gonna play Blink, you're gonna play Simic, just make sure she's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bance, Simic, I mean, Teamer. Teamer actually seems like it would be pretty good in as well because that's kind of a big creature color. So, you know, if you can get a Galta down and then you play Prime Speaker, I mean, that's...
Ooh, yeah.
That seems pretty neat.
Yeah.
It seems pretty okay. So Brett, actually, we actually have a second ulterior motive for having you on the show. So before we jump into building how you build commander decks, I want to briefly discuss the fact that it's kind of both of our content creator birthdays.
It is. Yeah, like it's actually today, the day we're recording this is the exact day of the first video that I put out last year.
Oh,
so
wow.
The first video for the channel was January 13th, 2018.
Oh, snap. So it is your birthday.
Today's gonna be A-okay, cause we're celebrating your birthday. Happy birthday, CJ, celebrating your birthday.
So it's really cool that we got you on your birthday. Our first episode released January 10th, so we're fairly close as well. So just as a bird's eye view, you know, neither of us did any sort of content creation before this, as far as I know. How do you feel about Magic since you've been doing this? Like, do you have an alternate like opinion, or has the community been what you thought it was? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, before starting this, I kind of just wanted to play more Magic. I had an okay amount of Magic in my life, but I wanted more. And so I was like, all right, well, I mean, if I can encourage more people to play Commander, maybe, you know, I can get out to more events, and like this will kind of encourage me to do that, get me out of my comfort zone, and just kind of like, maybe this will mean that I get to go to more games outside of my house, outside of my LGS, that kind of thing. It seemed like a good way to go about it, but it also seemed like I could, you know, spread the good word of Commander to more people and get them to start enjoying the format that I love so much. What it has ended up doing, though, is it actually ends up meaning I get to play less Commander, just because I'm stuck at my computer desk making more content, or at least trying to make more content. I keep saying that I want to get a backlog of content, but I just never get around to, like, I get a week or two of buffer, and then I take on too much of a I plan too big of a project in the meantime, and it's like, well, okay, now I don't have any time left. My last video was a week ago, and I have nothing to show for it, and I have no new videos coming down the pipeline. So, I haven't actually been to a Commander League game in a couple of months now at this point, but I still do have my friends over to play Commander at my house. We try to go once a month, but obviously over Christmas that was a lot harder to arrange schedule wise, so that didn't happen. But and it's not looking like January is too much of a better situation. But the community has been extremely supportive of my channel, and I know that with your channel as well, they've been trying to promote you as much as possible, and other content creators have given you shout outs, and the same thing for me. I thought going into it that I was going to have to fight tooth and nail to get anywhere, but it's been everyone has been backing me up. Everywhere I go, it's people are like, hey, they'll ask questions on Twitter, for example, and they'll be like, hey, what do you think of this card? And they'll put me in with a whole bunch of other, let's say the top 5. They'll tweet my name in with the top 5. And I'm like, what are you doing asking me these questions? I'm nobody. You're asking Josh Lee Kwai questions about Commander, and then also mentioning and asking me at the same time. Pretty sure his answer is going to be the same, either the same as mine or better.
It's kind of like when people tag us and Tolarian Community College. They're like, what do you think of this new Merfolk? Tolarian Community College and Fishcast. It's like, what, us?
Yeah.
You want my opinion?
And that's what I love about this community. All of the whole Magic community has been great for that. It's it's almost like they want us to be seen by the big guys, and maybe they'll be like, hey, let's collaborate, or maybe you should look at these guys a bit more because they're up and comers and they're good stuff. But I don't know. It's been every time I get a little bit I don't want to say I don't want to say down, but every time I get a little bit disheartened or a little bit why am I bothering, I get one of those things, one of those tweets or a comment on a YouTube video, and I'm like, no, that's why. That's what I need. I need more of that right now. And then I get back in the swing of, okay, put out more content, sit your butt down, do the research, write the script, edit the video, whatever it is, and then it's just been overwhelming, to be honest. And I'm so glad that I chose the time I did when I chose to start.
Completely agree. My experience has been very, very similar to yours. I think the fact that Magic is such a diverse game, there's so many ways to play it, there's so many ways to enjoy it, that there's not one channel that could cover everything and do it well. And the fact that we've gotten some more niche type channels, ours very, very much included, because we're very, very niche. I think it really helps out. And the fact that everybody's been so gracious, the rising tide rises all ships. So
yep.
Really appreciate everything we've had done. And more recently, I got tagged on personally, which usually it's the Fishcast, not me myself. But I got tagged personally on one of those. I'm like, that's just really cool. So yes, thank you for everybody out there.
Yeah,
definitely.
And, definitely a big shout out to MTG Strategist who put together the Discord group of content creators, and not necessarily. I mean, there are some of the bigger guys in there, bigger guys and girls in there, big girls. That sounds really weird. Big gals that are
just move on.
Just don't even bother trying to correct that.
Yeah, don't turn around. Don't just keep moving.
That are kind of really bigger in the community, and but it's mostly those of us in the couple hundred subs to just over 1,000 subs people. And that includes, YouTubers like Brett here in the conversation and podcasters like us that kind of have very slightly different focuses, and different content ranges, because we all have our niches and what we do. But it allows us to support each other, because at least when it comes to podcasting and YouTube, we're only in very slight competition for each other's time, or for our audience's time, and really it only benefits us to push each other up, because if you think about it, like I said, we're in very slight competition, but it's like, hey, look, this person is somebody who's deserving of your time. This is somebody that if you're watching YouTube videos and you care about Commander, go to Brett, or go to these people. And of course, everybody knows, we always have, the command zone, we always have, Jumbo Commander. We always have those big guys that everybody knows, but it's like, hey, look, if you want something more, go to here. Or if you want Merfolk, go to Tolarian. But if you want something a little bit more Merfolk, go to like Nikachu, or go to Fishcast, or go to, there's a few other spots. So it's kind of cool to help diversify people's focus, I suppose. Like if find
knowledge
people,
portfolios.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good use of your degree there.
And I think the some of the top end of the Magic YouTube community has also mentioned that there are plenty of other channels to watch, and that there aren't enough of any format to satisfy all the needs of the people wanting to watch. So like, sure, you're right, we might be slightly in competition with each other, but even like there's still not enough people making content in that space where we overlap. There's not enough people making content for that to satisfy the demand by the people watching. And that sounds ridiculous, considering I think I don't think I have the most up-to-date stats, but I think it was something like a year's worth of content gets uploaded to YouTube every second.
Oh, I believe it.
Like, there's no physical way to watch all of that content, but there's still a demand for that much content. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we have to worry about competition too much. So realistically, why wouldn't we want to help each other out?
Exactly.
So you better watch out, Brett. We're coming for you.
Damn it! You saw through my nice guy ad.
All right, so now that we're through all that, happy birthday to all of us here, both Fishcast and Kitchen Table Commander alike.
Did
happy
you really
birthday!
Just wish yourself a happy birthday.
I wished us a happy
We
birthday, Matt. Happy birthday to all.
Yes.
So we're gonna go into our main topic, which is Brett.
Commander.
Yeah, Commander. we want to talk about Commandy.
Yes.
Brett, how do you go about brewing a Commander deck? What? So when you set out to like build one of your decks for one of your videos, where do you start? Like how do you go about picking a Commander?
So like, for example, let's go with like I'll start off with an example of like I'm looking right now at all the potential legendary creature Merfolk through Scryfall, just like legendary creature subtype Merfolk, and just like going through and looking at them like, okay, what Merfolk speaks to me on a like purely like what does this guy do kind of thing, and like Prime Speaker Zagana is a, excuse the pun, prime example.
Waka waka! Ah, waka waka waka!
But like you look at Prime Speaker Zagana, you look at Kumena, and you're like, okay, read wall of text. What do? Basically, I just kind of like look at it and I'm like, okay, where's the weirdest part of this, like rules text or ability, and how do I take advantage of it like I'm not going to take advantage of it in a competitive way, but I'm going to take advantage of it in a what seems like a kind of like a weird mechanic or like what like an odd perspective on the card. So for Prime Speaker Zagana, obviously I'm going to want to I'm going to want to make lots of large creatures. And it seems like counters is the big way to do that because she deals with counters. So I would kind of go along the lines of instants and sorceries that can add counters to things like permanently, not just temporarily for end of turn. Anything that enter the battlefield, add a counter kind of thing, move counters, graft, things like that. And I would just kind of go in that method. But like I can go back to one of my first commander decks, which was Omnath Locus of Rage. That one was purely, I opened it in my pre-release, and I got the date stamp pre-release promo foil, and I was like, ooh, that's pretty. I should make a commander deck around that. And it was literally like what it started with. It was just, oh, this is shiny. And then I was like, okay, how do I take advantage of the mechanic? So I was like, all right, I got to make it elemental tribal because just screams elementals. And then I was just like, okay, what's all the weird, like unusual elementals, like lightning elemental and I'm trying to remember the decks that I have him in. But just like weird stuff like that. It really, I don't
so you're not building turn 2 win decks.
No, I don't like decks that are not fun. Like I build a deck that's fun, not necessarily a deck that wins.
Yeah. And
I know that like there are a lot of people that just want to play the game to win and they don't care how they get there. I that's not my play style. That's not how I like to play. But
I've personally found that play style is only fun if everybody at the table is on the same page and everybody's playing decks of that power level. So you know that if you're going to play something super broken on turn 1 or 2, there's potentially a force of will coming your way.
Yeah, and I totally and I.
But
I
again, showing up to a
that.
random table with somebody who has a pre-con, what's the point?
Yeah, you've just paid like $1,000 to make a deck that might get you a win of a tournament at like your LGS if they do like competitive commander stuff. Mm-hmm. Or if for example Magic Fest starts doing commander as their main, then that's cool. But if you're just playing with friends, why would you want to do that? Why would you do that to your friends? Don't be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now in your example with Omnath, you picked a card that kind of spoke to you, that it was shiny, it had a lot of flavor to it. And this was a card that kind of jumped out at you as like, oh my gosh, you should build me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes, I mean, both Matt and I are big Commander players, and that happens all the time, I'm sure, because it happens to me for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But in the case of Merfolk, it's kind of one of those things where there are some Merfolk commanders where it's like, oh, this is a Merfolk deck. And then there's some commanders...
You're going to be playing tribal.
Yeah, you're playing... like, if you pick, like, Kumena, let's say... like Kumena
you're definitely playing...
You're like, how do I build the best Merfolk deck possible? Whereas, like, a couple months ago, we had Russell on the show, and he brought his Ambassador Laquatus self-mill artifacts deck. And that was super cool. And that's a Merfolk as a commander, but the focus isn't really on the Merfolk. It's just like this is something that you're doing.
For like the last year, I've been brewing this SIG River Guide Voltron deck. One day, I'm actually going to put the dang thing together. I'm just still missing too many of the cards for it, including the SIG, because I have to have a foil if I'm going to do it.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's another thing with commanders. So like there's just always that little bit like, oh, I want a foil. I want a foil of whatever it is. Like, and specifically, most people don't care necessarily if they get their entire deck foiled out, but they want the commander foil. Right?
And the problem is, every time I look at it, it's like, the regular card's like 49 cents. The foil, $17.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Justification.
But yeah, I've actually been looking at that Ambassador Laquatus mill deck myself. I actually didn't start with him as the commander, and I'm tempted to actually switch him out because that's kind of where I was going with that deck in the first place.
We'll have to get you in touch with Russell on Twitter then, because you guys could probably share some ideas.
Oh yeah,
and so I definitely want to point out, that a lot of Merfolk commanders unfortunately just aren't great. Like they're I mean, as far as legendary creatures go, a lot of legendary creatures are just not great commanders. Like either they don't lend themselves.
Bite your tongue.
Either they don't lend themselves to the format, like what was that black red elder dragon that like makes copies of each creature that has the same name as another creature or something like that.
It was the one from it was the mythic
from Dragons
red black
of
one
Tarkir.
from Dragons of Tarkir.
Yeah, so there are just some creatures. Yeah. There's some creatures that don't.
Yeah,
lend
he literally
themselves,
can't do anything.
Yeah, there's some creatures who just don't lend themselves to a format. And then in our case with Merfolk, we have creatures that both serve a primary format or primary purpose as a Merfolk commander, and a secondary format as like this is a mill deck, or this is like Sig River Cutthroat is very common in like unblockable decks. Like there's so Brett, before we go on, with this dearth of commanders that we can pick from in the format of commander, what are some of the resources that you go to kind of get your footing? Like when you pick, let's say Omnath as your commander, where do you go to kind of start building your deck? Do you start at the land base? Do you start at the creatures? Where do you go?
For me, it kind of depends on the commander's ability to begin with. Like with Omnath, I went with creatures because I needed to focus very much on elementals, obviously red and green only elementals. But I needed to what are the better elementals? Ones that aren't just like vanilla, preferably with some sort of enter the battlefield or secondary abilities that, I can, triggered abilities, things like that. And it's just like, okay, so now that I've got some elementals, I need some support. So what am I going with for keeping them safe until I can get Omnath, because that's an expensive commander. It's just like I started off with the creatures, and then I went with how do I get more landfall? Because the main win con for this deck is boundless realms for as damn many lands as you got. I think the most I've ever done was I think I had boundless realms for 7, so I just kept getting. So I just got 7 5/5s.
That's neat.
I don't have a doubling season in the deck, although it could easily be added as an upgrade. And like anything along those lines could be put in there. Just give you that extra boost and get 14 5/5s.
Sometimes it's good not to play that card because all of a sudden you become, if that hits the battle or the board, you are now target number 1. And even if it leaves the board, sometimes you're still going to be target number 1 because you're the guy who has that in your deck.
Yeah, exactly. You put a doubling season out with an Omnath landfall deck, and people are like, okay, you're the problem here.
Yeah.
And then
you shall die.
Yeah, and then they are like, okay, well, we got rid of his doubling season, but what if he has something else that does the same thing?
Yep.
Right.
Yep. I agree.
Or just brings it back from the graveyard.
Yeah, like who knows what might be in the deck that might be able to keep that going.
And green has no ways to bring enchantments back from the graveyard.
Nope.
That was with heavy air quotes for our audio only listeners.
He's lying. He didn't air quote until after he said it.
Oh, sarcasm. I get it.
I get it.
But so that's kind of where I went with Omnath. I really didn't have. I didn't really put too much effort into the land base on that one, to be honest. It was just kind of like I got some utility lands, and I had already had like a jungle basin lying around, so I was like, okay, a little bit of mana wrap, that's good. So it's there really isn't a whole lot going on with the land base.
So Matt,
for this one,
really. So before we move on to further deck building, where do you start when you build a commander deck?
Kind of similar. I kind of choose based on either a commander that kind of speaks to me, or B, finding a unique ability or kind of a theme that I haven't really explored or haven't explored in a while, and want to take advantage of that. Usually I do start with the mana base, especially because unless I'm like in a monocolored deck, just to make sure that I have the cards within my collection to build the deck that I want to build. Especially some of the mana is usually the most expensive things you have to have in the deck. From there, I kind of do a quick search to see. I usually hit EDH Rec just to kind of get ideas. But then I also kind of do the same thing. I'll go on Scryfall or whatever and try to find some of the more obscure cards and put them in, just because I think it's more fun. I've said this a couple times now. I'm really kind of done with competitive Commander. I'm really just trying to build fun decks from here on out. And I was telling a buddy of mine that's in our playgroup, Kody, that honestly, if I never won another game of Commander, I would be completely okay with it.
You've never told me that before.
Well, for you, I wouldn't beat you every single time. It's a completely different situation. For example, just a random obscure card that I had to put into one of my decks was I had a Child of Alara Lands Matters deck. The primary win con was Maze's End. But I have a copy of Pyramids from Arabian Nights, and I'm like, I have to put it in there. It's not very good in this deck, but it's a land-based card. Gotta be in there. So same kind of thing.
Yeah. So the way I do it is like, if first off, a card has to speak to me, like a commander has to speak to me. But I always start with the land base. And so I do want to share this because I don't think this has gone very far in the commander Twitterverse place. But I use what's called as the Nate's formula. So Nate is a former host of the Commander podcast. He's also a writer for EDH Rec, and he's currently a host of Commander Time, another Commander podcast. So his, or Burgess's Law, I think was the actual name for it. Nate Burgess. And so I always start with the lands because that helps me figure out like how much of other things I'm able to put in. So the formula for the basis of how many lands that you should start with in a commander deck is the number 30 plus the CMC of the commander plus the number of cards, or the number of colors in that commander's color identity. So like, let's say we'll use Tatiova Benthic Druid as an example. So you start with 30, add 5 for the CMC, and then add 2 for the color identity. So that starts you at 37. So now that's not necessarily saying that you have to have 37 lands in the deck to make a Tatiova deck relevant. But it's a good starting point. And then, so once you start building the deck and kind of figuring out where like average CMC costs are, the number of colors that you need, so the number of forests versus islands, that can affect your land count as well. That's kind of where I end up starting, and that kind of informs the rest of my deck building.
I'm just really impressed because when we started the night, you had trouble counting to 4. And you just
managed to get
together
to 37.
Yeah, you just put together a calculation and it didn't screw it up. So, Brett, I have a follow-up question. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying a little bit, and this which sparked my thought, was how much do you take budget into consideration when building your decks? Because, I mean, you can go on deck stats and things like that, and you see quite a few decks that are $49. Pre-cons, I think, are, 40 now with the price increase in those. Yeah, you can play right out the box. But then you also see decks that are up to $2,000, up to $4,000. So where do you find the sweet spot? Or do you take that into real consideration when you build?
Yes and no. I do take it into consideration to an extent, but there are just like sometimes I'll just build a deck and I'll be like, okay, well this card kind of has to go in, and it kind of bumps me up over, like $100 or whatever. I think when I built the Niv Mizzet deck for Aether Hub, it was just a little over $100, and I feel like that may have been just, I called it budget, but I think people weren't considering it all that budget. It's right now listed as 112 on TCG Player, so it's not unreasonable given that you're buying 100 cards, that you're paying $1 a card. I don't think.
No, that seems completely fair.
And like,
Yeah.
you're getting a Jaya Ballard, a Ral Izzet Viceroy. There's Soul Ring, which by itself is like $2 or $3, I think, right now. I mean, it's not unreasonable given the number of cards and in some cases the individual cards that are in there for it to be $100. I'll tell you right now that I am trying to go a little bit cheaper on some of them just to kind of get more budget-friendly options for people. I've got a deck that I'm working on the video for it right now. Well, not right now, but
This moment,
soon.
he's
This-
podcasting
Brett is
and
multitasking.
You're
He's
hearing
not
all these
paying
mouse
attention.
clicks, and it's actually just me editing the timeline on this deck. I'm working on a Tetsuko unblockable deck, and right now on TCG Player it's listed as about $48.
that's pretty
So-
good.
Full commander deck, $48.
Yeah, and I mean, Matt spoke to budget, but everyone's budget's a little different. I've spent I just for comparison on MTGO I just spent $50 per True Name Nemesis on my Legacy deck. So everybody's budgets are slightly different, but I'd say $100 is fairly widely considered a budget deck in Commander.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, like, I think a lot of people consider like that $100 $1 a card kind of thing fairly reasonable.
Especially since basic lands cost, pennies.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
basic lands are free. If anybody needs basic lands, contact me. I will mail them to you. I will even eat the stamp.
Nice.
I want a video of you.
I'm
eating a
I'm
stamp.
just that kind of guy.
Yeah,
Only if you need them. I don't want to spend like hundreds of dollars on postage just because you want me to send you a basic land.
like I'm looking at the Tetsuko deck, and I've got a bunch of islands, and it's listed as like 350, 360. It's like 10 cents an island, basically, and it's like that's nothing. Don't even consider. Like,
I'll tell you what, we're going to kind of go off in the woods just a little bit, but I am absolutely loving the Uncommon Dominaria Legends. I'm trying to brew so many of them right now. I think they're so much fun.
yeah,
Interesting.
there are a lot of cool legends in Dominaria.
Definitely.
Like the Lonely King. The
yeah.
giant. I literally am building a giant Voltron version of him
Mono
just
green
because
Voltron.
I want to mono green Voltron just because I want to turn him sideways and yell monkey beats.
Oh yes.
You should get one of those Donkey Kong bongo controllers for the GameCube, and just
I'm gonna bring my own bongos with me.
Oh, Matt, you're gonna want a Rogue's Passage in that Grun deck.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
100%. We're already there. So now you've got
It is going to win by commander damage and commander damage only. There might not be any more creatures in the deck. It might just be the commander.
so
Sweet.
Brett. Now you've got your commander and you've got your kind of budget in mind. I'm sure part of what your budget consists of is what you have on hand, and then what you're willing to reasonably spend on things that need to come in the mail. Because I'm sure as Matt I do, and I'm sure Matt does, is kind of you kind of roughly build out a deck, and then you kind of look through what you got, and you go like, oh yeah, this would kind of work, and you kind of make slight adjustments based off what's on hand, and then you go, no, I don't have this card, but it has to be in here, and you place your order on TCG Player, right? So now you've got your kind of skeleton of your deck. Most of the cards are pretty solid, but you haven't play tested it. So what are kind of your so when you start playing the deck, What are the things that you look for as like, this is a keeper, or this is something that maybe should work its way out of the deck?
So like a lot of times what I'll do is I'll end up playing it on MTGO, usually as part of the Commander 99 multiplayer showdown stuff. And I'll be like, okay, was this ever a dead card in my hand? A. Did it win me the game? B. And did it underperform compared to the other decks? A lot of times is what I'll do. So like, if there's a card where there was no time in any of the games where I could actually cast it and it would have done any good, I go back and I was like, okay, maybe we should take that out. Maybe we should change that for something different. And like the opposite's true. If I have a card where I've played it and everyone immediately is like, oh crap, we're gonna lose, and it just like it continuously overperforms and does great stuff for me, that stays in. That's like, now it's got an asterisk beside it that says never take this out of the deck, and that kind of thing. But it's just basically, if there's any time where the card didn't do what I expected it to do, or be as useful as it was, that's when I kind of have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, maybe this needs to come out. And then I look at alternatives, not necessarily the exact abilities or casting costs or anything like that. Just like, what can I replace it with reasonably, and preferably not go up in price for the deck. Like, I'd like to keep it relatively similar. And one time I was like, hey, I asked a friend, I was like, hey, what do you think about this card? And he's like, oh, okay, that's good, but you could replace it with this one. And then he gives me a card that's like 30 times more expensive. And I was like, okay, but I'm trying to stick to a budget here.
So
and I'm like,
just for everybody out there, that's why commander groups are absolutely amazing, because you don't have to buy the $30 card. You can have somebody in your commander group buy the $30 card and borrow it indefinitely.
yes.
until they need it for one of their commander decks, then you have to graciously give it back and say thank you.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of one of the beauties of Commander, where like, you know, you can be playing in Brett's example with Omnath, you know, a doubling season would be fantastic. No doubt about
theory.
it. You know, on paper,
yes.
on paper, it would be a 100%.
It's actually tabletop now.
Sorry, in tabletop, it would be a 100% auto include, and nobody would bat an eyelash if that was not in the deck. But even with its most recent printing, it is kind of still an expensive card. So one might look to Parallel Lives as a slightly cheaper and maybe not quite 100%, you know, replacement effect, but it is very close. And that's kind of what I like about Commander is, you know, like, yeah, Force of Will is a great Magic card. Nobody has any doubt in their mind whatsoever that Force of Will.
But have you ever played Quelch?
Yeah. And or Counterspell or Foil, or, you know, any number of counterspells that are equally as good or better in Commander. And there's just so many great ways that you can kind of work those cards in. All right, so now you've tested your deck, Brett, and
yes.
you're ready to kind of do some last minute touches and kind of make a video about your Omnath deck, right? What is like the fine, like, is there any moment that you look at a deck and you go, this is a deck that I need to make a video about? Or like, this is what made me want to make a video about it? Or do you start out from the beginning wanting to make a video about a specific deck?
I usually start off with wanting to make a deck specifically about, wanting to make a video specifically about the deck. I mean, as much as I'd love to have the time to make decks just for fun, just for me, most of the time it's just doing it for the channel. But so it's like it's intentionally designing the deck for the video, or the video for the deck, kind of like how you'd say. But yeah, no, it's I think it's one of those things where I'm building the deck, I'm designing the deck, I'm going through like the theory craft on it, and then it's like, okay, now I think it's ready. There's like, it goes through a bunch of iterations before I start making the video. But yeah, that's kind of how it runs.
Now, how do you feel about auto includes in Commander? Where I'm getting at is every deck runs Soul Ring, or every blue deck runs Cyclonic Rift. Do you kind of adhere to some of those unspoken Commander rules, or because essentially they can take about like 25% of your deck in some cases of your choices, or do you try to get more creative, or just don't care about the unwritten rules of certain colors?
I usually try to be a little bit more creative. I'm sort of on the edge of caring about whether certain colors auto includes are a thing. Like Cyclonic Rift, totally get it. It's a great card, but do you need to pay? I think it's like $15-$16 right now, something like that. Do you need that in your deck when you could, when you could go slightly cheaper and maybe afford, something different? Yeah, something different. But it's like, do you need to spend that extra money on a card when, you can have just as much fun without it? And most of the time you just hear groaning when you play Cyclonic Rift anyway. So like, do you want to play Cyclonic Rift, or do you want to have friends?
I don't want to have friends.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I'll unfriend you. That's fine. Like
Kody wants to be the lonely king.
The lonely lord of Atlantis.
Kody smash. No, like auto includes are great and everything, but I think it takes away from the creative process of deck building. If you know by default you have to add X number of cards because they need to go in your deck because you're that color, then is it really your deck anymore? Like, is it really your creative influence on the deck, or is it just like, oh, I know these cards go in here, and then I'll add a sprinkling of my creativity?
Yeah.
And I think that might be part of the reason why, people have liked my decks. But I also do get criticism. It's like, oh, but you haven't included this card or that card or, whatever. I very rarely add a Soul Ring into my decks. Like, I've made a couple where they're in there, and I will make the joke that in my videos that of course there's a Soul Ring because Soul Ring. But I think I only bought my first Soul Ring to put in a Commander deck like halfway through last year.
Mm-hmm.
And like the only thing that I ever have a Soul Ring in is maybe the precons, if I bought those. But most of my personal decks that I've had for forever do not have Soul Rings in them.
No, I haven't gone that far yet. We might see if I get there, but I agree with you on a lot of the points you just made. There was a point this year where Commander got really, really stale for me. And I kind of stopped playing the format. I kind of took a lot of my Commander decks apart. I was only going to keep one or two together. Then I think it was around the time we had our conversation with Russell. And I realized that Commander could be so much more. And I took apart or started looking at a different perspective. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just make these like goofy, fun, kind of like back to my root type decks. And I brought just a completely janky, goofy, fun deck to one of our Commander nights, and I got completely run over, but I had a ball playing it. And it was kind of cool to watch my play group, because over the next like 2 or 3 times we had Commander nights, all their mean, fast, just good decks, you start seeing those disappear, and other people were kind of playing fun stuff.
Yeah, they're like,
because I would play something, I would like giggle, I'd be like, this is so cool, and they'd be like, tutor, sort of, blah, blah, blah. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. I win. It's like, okay.
Cool.
You see how many Saffronlings I made?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you start realizing that the people that are playing these competitive decks that they've probably dumped hundreds of dollars in to make win on turn 3 or 4, that they're not actually having any fun playing those decks. And it's like, why would you spend that much money if you're not going to have fun with it?
Yeah, 100%.
Like, I looked up just while we were talking how much one of my like most ridiculous janky decks costs, and I've been building this for years, but it's It's $430 on TCG Player right now, and I didn't even realize that it was getting up there. But it's 5-color Super Friends, because that's a viable format.
If you're playing a Trax is 4 colors. Yeah, 5-color Super Friends.
Well,
Yeah.
and honestly, like a commander deck can live a life of its own. So I actually have a really interesting story, and actually something that Matt organized for our commander group when I lived down in San Antonio. So one Halloween, it was the Halloween before I left, we did an event where we all built Halloween-themed commander decks.
So just on a side note, about every other month when we do our commander nights, we pick a theme and we try to be kind of off the wall. So we've done Halloween one time. We've done Theros Gods one time. We're doing one in the near future. We have 2 planned. One is going to be uncommon commanders only, then you can only use, and no mythics, no rares. And the other one is they have to be win the game cards as your win condition.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so for Halloween, I was trying to think of a commander that would be kind of fun to build around. And I think I borrowed some cards from Matt, and I borrowed a few cards from other people for this deck. But I built mono blue, Stitch of Giralf, zombie tokens. And
Interesting.
And so the deck started out as a very ultra budget, ultra nothing deck. But then it very slowly built itself into having a Force of Will in the deck. Very slowly. I mean, over a couple years, it was like I opened a Force of Will. Oh, of course, a Force of Will goes in this deck, and that's kind of the beauty of Commander is like you can build a deck that goes, oh well, like the whole premise of this is to have fun and build play tokens, but like, oh yeah, I opened this crazy this card. Let's see what it does in this deck, and not to say that like even having a Force of Will in a Commander deck isn't necessarily all that powerful. It's one out of 99 cards.
Yeah, it's very conditional. Like it's good when it needs to be.
Exactly. And so I'm very much of the same school of thought as Matt, and it sounds like Brett, of just like I want to have fun. I want to play Commander, and I want to do the weird thing that my deck is trying to do. And that's it. I like if I lose, then okay, well maybe I didn't mill as hard as I should have. Maybe I didn't make tokens as hard as I should have. But I had fun. My deck kind of did what it was supposed to do, and there's no harm in that. And yeah, that's pretty great. Brett, so before we close out, do you have any last recommendations for building a commander deck or anything like that?
Yeah, I'd say if you kind of know what colors you'd like to be in, or what kind of abilities you want to look for in a commander, just find the one that gives you the most joy, or at least that you think might have the most joy behind it when you go to pick your commander. Don't pick one that you think can win you the game instantly, or that if you manage to cast is going to completely turn the tide. Find the one where the deck will play. Well, obviously, you want it to play smoother, but find the commander that will be the most fun, and screw auto includes. Find the weird janky cards that again make the deck fun,
or cards that let you yell monkey beats.
Also that.
Yeah,
that's an option too.
And honestly, that's one of the things that so I use an app on my phone. It's on iPhone and Android. It's called Decked Builder. And it lets you. It's very similar to Scryfall, where you can just kind of search for, like, a name. Like you could search for Defender, or you could search for Wall, or you could search for Flying, and it'll give you in the colors that you search for. It can give you those specifics that you're looking for. And so oftentimes, both EDH Rec and Decked are very good at finding cards that you didn't know about that are just like, oh, I want a deck that's all birds, or I want a deck that's all that really fits
alligators.
The alligator crocodile theme. So those are great resources. And honestly, pick a cheaper version of a card as what is my kind of final recommend. Like if you find a card that you really like, but there's something similar that's cheaper, go for it. Just see what happens.
All right, so here's my 2 cents. So my recommendation is you should probably reach out to Brett
I appreciate that.
on Twitter or any of the things, or watch any of Brett's shows or content on YouTube at Kitchen Table Commander.
Yeah, so
And that's all I would do.
yeah, Brett, where can we find you on all the social
Or if
medias?
you want to do something really goofy, at Brett and Russell, because Russell's got some really off the wall ideas.
I'm still working on my Disney themed commander deck.
Oh, it's happening. I have to buy like 30 of the cards. It's just a matter of like pushing like submit.
That's the hardest part.
And the problem is they're all like 30-cent cards. It wouldn't even cost me that much.
So Brett, where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitch at kitchentablecmd. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/kitchentablecommander, twitch.tv/kitchentablecommander, and if you feel so inclined, patreon.com/kitchentablecommander.
Awesome. We are, as always, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook is at fishcastmtg. I am personally not Kody Smith on Twitter. And where can we find you, Matt?
I'm on the internets. Matthew Caudill 8. Just you want to talk Commander? Please contact me. If you want to talk about good Commander decks, I will tell you more fun ways to play them.
And if you have a longer form question, you can feel free to email us at fishcastmtg@gmail.com. Our cover art was made by Tessa and Hunter Pruitt, and our logo and stream art was done by @Ishton on Twitter. If you like what we're doing here, please rate and subscribe in the Apple.
Hey, Ishton also did the art for our playmat, so.
Our playmat and an upcoming Patreon reward, and also
it's a secret.
Also, Brett's art, Brett's channel art. So
my channel logo is also from Ishton.
Yes,
fantastic artist. If you need anything, contact him.
Yeah, Ishton is super awesome. Find him at Ishton on Twitter. If you like what we're doing here, please rate and subscribe in the Apple or Google Play podcast app stores, as well as find us on Patreon at patreon.com/fishcastmtg, where for 50 cents an episode, you can get the show a few days early and ad-free. And that money honestly pays for way more than we get in ad revenue. So that honestly is a way better way to support us than us getting pennies per episode. So we
Kody,
think
when we hit $1 in ad revenue, I'm coming to Oklahoma.
we've hit $14 in ad revenue over a year. So
I mean in a month.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your time, and thank you again to Brett from Kitchen Table Commander for coming on the show.
Yes, Brett. Thank you. This was a ton of fun tonight.
No, thank you for having me.
It was a lot of fun having you on the show, and everybody out there in the Twitter/Instagram/internet world, we will see you all next week.
Have a good night, good morning, whatever you are in the past, future, present. Enjoy it.
Pick a tense and stick with it.
Exactly.
Yes, that's the
sub theme.
The sub theme, or the geez, what is that thing that the moral of the show? Pick a tense and stick to it. That's the moral of this show, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Today's gonna be A-OK, 'cause we're celebrating your birthday. Happy birthday, CJ, celebrating your birthday.
What are you doing?
Today's gonna be A-OK, 'cause we're celebrating your birthday. Happy birthday,
Randall.
celebrating your birthday.
That sounds simple and fresh. Pretty catchy.
Today's gonna be A-OK, 'cause we're celebrating
stop
your
it!
birthday. Happy birthday, everyone, celebrating your birthday. Today's gonna be A-OK, 'cause we're celebrating your birthday. Happy birthday
to you. Come on! Yeah!
Today's gonna be A-OK,
Get off of my stage!
your birthday. Happy birthday, everyone, celebrating your birthday. Today's gonna be